Jennifer Valley. She's one of the most recent elected members of the Franklin County Central Committee, newly elected, and she just formed a PAC here in Worthington, Protect Worthington Children, just to talk about bring awareness to the gender ideology that's going on in the schools and what's being taught and pushed in the schools. So really want to hear what Jennifer has going on here, and welcome Jennifer Valley.
So I'm going to provide some information. Is that loud enough? No. Fine. Okay, I'm going to provide some information, about what Worthington Schools is doing with the gender stuff. Also about a group that has formed of concerned parents and citizens with the goal of fighting the indoctrination in the schools, get them to focus on academics, and elect some like-minded people to the school board. Right now, our focus is on the gender, but as we grow, we want to address all forms of indoctrination in the schools. We'll eventually get to social emotional learning and everything that comes under that. First, what they're teaching. It's going to be a process to find that out, but I did look at the high school health textbook called Comprehensive Health. It has been in the school since the 2019-2020 school year. And what it teaches is that sex and gender are two different things. They might not match, and that's perfectly normal. So what we are as humans, according to the textbook, we are what we feel we are. And what we feel we are is our gender. And for those students that feel that their gender doesn't match their sex, they teach them, and I'm quoting from the textbook, that some children choose to change their appearance, clothing, and name to match the gender they feel they really are. The textbook also tells them they may choose to undergo surgery, and I quote, to match their organs with their gender, and that parents should be supportive. There's a handout in front of you, and it gives several examples of how the textbook explains gender. And I think it's really a lot of contradicting explanation and very confusing. They say that sex and gender are two different things, and then to me they seem to be using the words interchangeably, which again is confusing. Something I thought was really revealing about the book was they presented two chromosomal abnormalities, sex chromosome abnormalities, as if these abnormalities are evidence that normal human sexuality isn't that cut and dry, that we can be born in the wrong body, basically. Now there is such a thing as disorders of sex development. Sometimes it's called intersex, and that's several different types of abnormalities, and in those cases, sex can be ambiguous. But it's a disorder. It affects about 0.02% of the population. Even the World Intersex Organization says it is not, that these people don't have another gender identity. And this is what the textbook says. At the end of that section where they talk about these disorders, the textbook says, these observations indicate that being male or female is more complicated than possessing certain sexual anatomy or sex chromosomes. And I find that very misleading. I think these disorders tell us nothing about what is normal human sexuality. Another thing that I thought was really telling about this textbook, they do not even mention the existence of gender dysphoria, or the fact that it is a psychological disorder, or that the standard treatment for this disorder, the watchful waiting approach, results in the vast majority of these kids accepting their bodies. Okay, so in summary, the textbook, the high school health textbook, teaches false information about human sexuality and then can contribute to actually manufacturing these gender identity disorders. claims that chromosomal abnormalities and other disorders are evidence that human sexuality isn't cut and dry, doesn't mention gender dysphoria or the fact that it's a psychological disorder, doesn't mention the treatment approach that results in most kids accepting their sex, and instead suggests only gender-affirming treatment and encourages the child to impersonate the opposite sex. So if you think about this, let's say you have a kid who's gender confused, and you don't tell them about the treatment that is successful up to 98% of the time, and instead you do tell them about a treatment that can have permanent effects. They lose for life their sexual function, they're sterile. I think it's unconscionable that our school is teaching this. Okay, the very use of the word gender, that's also an invention. Prior to 1950s, it was just a word for the grammar of language, where we had male and female words. But in the 1950s, Dr. John Money, he had an agenda of sex reassignment, and he hijacked the word and redefined it. Now, nowadays, the definition for gender nowadays is it is the lived role of male or female resulting from the interaction of physical, cultural, and psychological factors. Which, I mean, the definition is not the problem. It's when they take that definition and use it to redefine reality and say there aren't just two sexes, or a male can become a female, or a tomboy is a boy, or you can be born in the wrong body. They make it sound like it's really complicated instead of a simple matter of male and female with varying degrees of masculinity and femininity, varying personalities and interests. So I think that's part of their agenda, is to confuse. So that's the high school health textbook. Now, we don't know what grade they start formally teaching the gender ideology, but we do know it is in the lower grades, at least informally. One mom shared a form with me that she had to fill out for her 7th grader, and it asked sex assigned at birth. And the choices are female, male, and intersex. Mind you, intersex exists, but it's a disorder of human development. It affects less than 0.02% of the population, and it does not constitute additional sex identities. Here again, I think the form is just another means to train us to start thinking differently about human sexuality. The form also asks, how do you identify your gender? And the choices are male, female, other. Okay. Also on your forms there, you'll see a picture. What that is showing is a couple of signs that were posted on a school door at Slate Hill Elementary by the librarian. The first sign tells the children that her preferred pronouns are they, them. She tells the children she doesn't feel like a girl or a boy. And the second sign gives them an example of how they are to speak of her using her they, them pronouns. So I met with a couple of representatives from the school, and I asked them, how do you handle preferred pronouns? And what I learned is that if a student or a teacher has preferred pronouns that do not match their sex, you are not allowed to use pronouns that do match their sex. Now you can avoid the preferred pronouns just by repeating your name, but if you use the non-preferred pronouns, and you do it deliberately, and it's not a one-time mistake, you can be investigated. And if they find you guilty of harassment, the student will pay the consequences. So they say, the school says that they have to do that because of Title IX. Well, they don't have to do that. Now, there is something going on with Title IX, and that's something I hope everybody here will do something about, because on the handout I've given you, there's a website. Right now, the U.S. Department of Education is proposing changing for Title IX the definition of sex to include sex orientation and gender identity, to call those groups anyway, a class of people that is protected from harassment and discrimination. We're in the public comment period, and that ends, you have through September 12th. On the form, there's a website where you can go and explain what the proposed changes are, what the ramifications will be, and a link for you to make a public comment. And I'm told that you can make more than one comment, as long as you're not saying the same thing. If you got some other aspect to comment on, you can comment more than once. And they are not allowed to make that change until they have responded to every single comment. So how does the school handle students who tell them they identify as trans? Are they telling the parents? I asked the representatives I met with, and they said, if the school judges that the parents could harm their child because of that news, they will not tell the parent. I did not find out what they define as harm. Now elsewhere, I know that, not going along with social transition or medical transition, whatever, parents have lost their kids. I have no idea what's happening in our schools on that count. Okay, so the people pushing this ideology, believe it or not, they're convincing a lot of people that it is true. That there are many sex identities, and even adults are falling for it. One of the women I met with emailed me, and on her email, she said, gave her preferred pronoun. There was a link beside it that you could click on to learn why she gives her preferred pronouns, and that link tells you, that link tells you, that some people aren't what you think they are. You can't go by what people look like. This is happening even though there's no scientific evidence to support this gender ideology. There is science to disprove it. Twin studies alone disprove it. So in the face of this campaign, I think it's really important to keep the distinction in mind between the disorder and the ideology that's trying to normalize the disorder. Okay, just wanted to talk a little bit about gender dysphoria. Historically, it affected 0.01% of the population, affected primarily little boys, sometimes adolescent boys. It was practically non-existent in girls, especially adolescent girls. The industry standard for treatment was the watchful waiting approach, which could include, psych intervention, for maybe depression, anxiety, whatever is going on. Kids that are not encouraged to impersonate the opposite sex. And the range of recovery with that treatment approach, depending on the study, because there are multiple studies showing that most recover, was something like 68 to 98% recover with that. Used to be called gender identity disorder, and changing the name to gender dysphoria was just part of the path to normalizing it, so it is not considered a disorder anymore. Unfortunately, it's no longer 0.01% of the population. It is skyrocketing, and unfortunately, girls, adolescent girls, where they used to be non-existent, are now the majority. Girls who never showed a sign of it when they were younger are saying they're trans. It's occurring in friend groups. There's reports that even 30% of the girls in a friend group identifying as trans, and it's often after a period of prolonged social media exposure. So the social contagion aspect is huge. Social media is grooming the kids. If they get in a chat with a trans activist online, if they say they're depressed, they're anxious, the activist says, you're trans. They love bomb them. If the kid comes out as trans, they praise them. They tell them how to hide it from their parents. They tell them, we're your family now. And they call themselves their glitter family. Now, there are some medical associations endorsing, quite a few actually, which have been ideologically captured, profit-driven, probably both. For example, the American Academy of Pediatrics now endorses affirmation only. In their endorsement, they cite several studies that supposedly provide evidence for their endorsement. It's totally dishonest. None of the studies even studied children with gender identity problems. Every single study studied people with adults with same-sex attraction. Didn't even look at kids with gender identity. NIH right now is conducting a study. It's designed to show that gender-affirming treatment is safe and effective. The study was given to 4 researchers who are huge advocates, already profiting, from gender-affirming treatment. There's no control group, and it only goes for 5 years. And problems and regret can arise much later. So, when you hear about a study, because they're going to come out, there are studies that come out that say gender-affirming treatment helps these kids. Just do some checking, because you'll find out they're lying. And I've got several examples that I have read about where they lie. They get caught. Very often, they get caught. Gender-affirming treatment then, includes puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgery. Long list of side effects, but they include, effects on brain development, bone development, intellect, irreversible changes, sterility, complications from surgery. These people become patients for life because they're fighting their normal bodily processes. Surgery, cutting off, healthy anatomical parts, and then the transition regret. And you can go online and see all kinds of transition regret stories. They're heartbreaking, and I find it really motivating to do something. Who is behind this? One is Marxist ideologues. The queer theorists are totally Marxist. A lot of profiteers, a lot of people making a lot of money off of this. And there is a small group of billionaires funding the propaganda and building the infrastructure. Interestingly, Europe is backing off. Great Britain just closed permanently their famous gender identity clinic called Tavistock. It's permanently closed. The parents there were in an uproar at what was being done to their children, and they closed it down. Finland and Sweden are another couple examples where they are backing off of gender-affirming treatment. At least one of those countries has prohibited anything that's irreversible. They're really approaching it as a medical problem, whereas we're treating it like a political problem. So in summary, what's happening is we're teaching a false concept of what it means to be human. The school's lying to the kids. They may be manufacturing gender identity disorders. Kids may not get the treatment they need to love their bodies as they are. Instead, they're encouraged to pursue gender-affirming treatment, which is irreversible and health-damaging. Minors can't consent to this. Parents may be in the dark. We know that if they don't impersonate the opposite sex, the vast majority are going to accept their bodies. We know if they do impersonate the opposite sex, the vast majority are going to go on to medical transition. So lives are being devastated. Parents, are seeing their kids fall victim to this trans agenda and are in total despair. How bad is it in Worthington schools? We really don't know yet how extensive it is, but it is there and it has been for years. Now about the group. We're using a Facebook group to organize. It's called Worthington Parents United. For anybody, you don't have to be a parent, I'm not. And we hope to get a few people together this Thursday to meet for the first time, because we're really a new group and we're very small. Also started a PAC called Protect Worthington Children. We will do fundraisers. We want to raise money for grassroots efforts. We want to be able to elect like-minded people to the school board. anyway, on the handouts, also you'll find some good resources. If you want to get knowledgeable, if you want ideas what you can do, going, calling, contacting the school board, making a comment at their meetings. And if you want to get involved, join our Facebook group, and we'll organize, and we'll have some grassroots efforts. So, any questions? Thank you. Barbara.
Have the Worthington parents asked anything about sports and what it's doing to girls' sports?
I left that meeting without asking that question. Could have kicked myself. I don't know what's happening with that. Now, one thing that was good about the meeting was they themselves said we're going to have more meetings, so I will have more opportunities to talk to them, and I'm going to find that out. Title IX is going to be huge because if they redefine that sex to include gender identity, it's going to evolve how we interpret that. It won't say you have to let boys in sports necessarily, but that's probably how it's going to get interpreted. So please do contact the U.S. Department of Education and make a comment against that.
It just seems like even the Democrats would not want their girls eliminated, like they're
Well,
being eliminated.
Yes, there are Democrats who don't go for this. And if you start reading the articles, you will find some Democrats writing against this.
Especially with girls.
Yeah. And there was a woman who came and talked to the Dublin Republican girl who's working on this in Dublin schools, and I don't think she was a Republican, was she?
I'm not sure. Yeah,
She didn't talk like she was.
Put the button up.
All right, so you had mentioned before that there was a problem with the textbooks, that they had said to you, the textbooks will remain, they will not take the textbooks out. So I think we need to come back with a way to combat that. Like, can we say, okay, if you are going to present this as such a one-sided, coming from it, can we have some professionals come in, that can explain to these children that it is okay to feel this way, that it's normal to feel and have questions, and not, like you said, 98% of the time, by the time you get into your teens, later teens, you're going to feel fine. So I think, can we come up with a way to combat those textbooks?
Yeah, I really think right now we just need more people. Our group, I have maybe 3 moms, I think, who are going to be actively involved. Our whole group is like 22 people. I've been going to the Board of Education meetings, every single one since the first one in June. I'm one person, and I told them, I said, that book's got to go, but they're not going to get rid of it because I said so. So yeah, we need to meet anybody who wants to get involved and come up with a strategy for getting rid of that.
Is the teachers union behind it too?
I don't know. I would guess they probably, no, I'll tell you this though. Probably, I would guess the union is, but not all the teachers are. In fact, I had one teacher join our group, and she said that she and several teachers in her school do not like what is happening, but they're afraid to speak out.
Oh, I see. And you're on the GOP Central Committee downtown in Franklin County?
Yeah.
One thing that I think we really could use is school board and city council slate cards that flesh this out. I tried to do my own research on the school board, found out they were all wackos. There was one different. All the other ones were trannies and all that nonsense.
Yeah.
And I think we need slate cards like we do for the big offices. Lastly, anyone who wants a nice light look at this serious thing, Daily Wire put out a movie called What is a Woman? It's about a phrase from the Supreme Court Justice, and it's hysterical, but it's deadly serious because you see doctors that are claiming themselves are trans, and they won't tell what medicines they use. It's just, it'll open everyone's eyes. Thanks.
Yeah, and now, Jeff, do you know, when are we electing school board members again? Is it
2023, Charlie Wilson and Amy Lloyd's seat comes up, so we have two
in
seats.
2023.
I know of two people. We would like to see at least another candidate or two step
You have
forward.
two people who
I
might.
know of two people that
Okay.
will be running. I'd like to see another one step forward. One might have some issues. Yeah, so we do.
Great.
The thing is, on the endorsement, that it's the central committee members within that school district that endorse. And in the past, I've run into some of these seats where the school board candidate, like in Worthington, doesn't want to have the Republican endorsement, because they want to have, because it's so blue here. So we run into that issue also. So, what's that? Yeah, they're that large, but the Democrat had to have slate card this year. They had the school board members on their slate cards. Well, no, they don't. But the Democrats did have the school board members on their slate card this year. On last November, they had the Democrat candidates listed. And then the conservative candidate they ran their own campaign pretty much. Jennifer Best was endorsed by the Franklin County. No, she was not on the slate. No, she was not. There weren't any endorsed. No one saw the endorsement, but that's up to the central committee members within that school district. They meet together and they make the endorsement. So, okay.
In your research on this, have you, and especially talking about NIH, and I'm just going, oh boy, Fauci, have you run into any names of any people, big people like Fauci or Walensky or any of these other characters, Francis Collins, who are tied to this in the federal government?
No, not in our federal government. I mean, I've heard names of people who are big in promoting it, but not in our federal government.
Okay, so they must be lobbying people at maybe at lower levels or something, because it doesn't, we got with the vaccination thing, people who are for medical freedom successfully tied names, identified people, and that was very helpful there in hearing that.
Oh, now, outside of government, there's a woman by the name of Jennifer Bilack who has written a few articles, because she's an environmentalist. She's no Republican, I don't think, but she got canceled for a speaking engagement because some trans activists didn't want her there. And so she was just flabbergasted.
What's her name?
Jennifer Bilack, B-I-L-E-K. So she started researching this, and she has written at least 2 or 3 articles, and she's got names and what they have done. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the Pritzker family. J.B. Pritzker, Jennifer Pritzker. They're big. Martine Rothblatt. Jennifer Pritzker is a man. Martine Rothblatt is also a man, male to female. He's a humanist, and he's all about changing the human body. He thinks we're going to become able to be eternal. He's just really weird. It's a lot of perverts, really, weirdos, billionaires financing a lot of this. I think it's one of the Pritzkers is credited with getting this in the military. Had a big influence there with his names.
Good. Yeah, those names were helpful to our side.
Yeah, I don't think it's on my list, but if you look up Jennifer Bilack, you'll find her.
Currently, under Ohio law, does a teenager who's under 18 need parental consent to take the medications that alter, your hormones, sex hormones, or to have gender-altering surgery? And or can kids under 18 approve that themselves?
I don't know. I don't know what our laws are on that, sorry.
So that's a key question. So my thinking is, right now, if you're under 18, you cannot buy a beer, you can't rent a car, you can't bet at the racetrack, you can't enter contracts, vote, join the military. any of that stuff because we all decided as a society that we don't want minors making significant decisions, and certainly, these medications and surgery are life-altering and potentially very damaging. So, I would look at, I would suggest you look
Yeah, I
into
know
that.
there's a bill was proposed to prohibit it, but I don't think it went anywhere. But I need to check on that.
Okay, then my other question is, you mentioned there's good news in England about that one clinic being shut down. Are there any good news stories on this issue around the United States that you can share with us?
Oh, where the courts or some decisions have come down in our favor, you mean? Well, yeah, a lot of this research that is really fraudulent is being found out about. There was a study out of Journal of Psychiatry, one of those, and they claimed that surgery resulted in better mental health outcomes. And a whole bunch of people wrote letters and said the study doesn't show that. And then it took them a while, took them a long time, but they eventually withdrew their primary conclusions and admitted surgery didn't help them at all. There's been studies that say that if they don't transition, they'll commit suicide, but that's been contradicted too. In fact, one study even shows that if they do transition, they're more likely to commit suicide. A lot of people are fighting this. In fact, one of the sites there is on the handout, is the American College of Pediatricians. And this is a group of doctors who have not been captured, and they're really vocal about gender identity. They got a ton of articles. Their site is just a wealth of information. So that's good news. I don't know. I think we're gonna have it's gonna be a battle. I think it could get worse.
Can you hear me? Oh. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you for taking a leadership role in this issue. I think, our group, we talk about politicians and stuff, but really when it comes to our children, that, in my heart at least, that really needs to be, a real priority. So thank you for that. And one of the things to think of, talking about, being able to have informed parents. But we actually have a good friend who, their son has been indoctrinated by the schools and is going through a transition, and the parents are actually supportive of this transition. And we're kind of heartbroken because we think it's really damaging. And one of the things I've seen is a lot of videos recently regarding people who have transitioned and gone through surgery and experiencing surgery regret. Their voices are suppressed, and they're not getting out, and their stories aren't getting told about the issues that come out. So thank you for taking leadership role on that. I think that one of the things that I observed, I went back to college like years later. It's been within 15 years, and one of the things primary reading was we had to read this thing. It was called Middlesex. It won a Pulitzer Prize, and so every teacher, younger teacher now who is teaching now, had to require to read that. So there's been this subtle transition of thinking about gender dysphoria as a normal state of being, and it is really heartbreaking. So thank you for.
Yeah, I really think we've got to fight this all out because they are trying to redefine reality, and people are falling for it.
So my last question. I've heard that under the, some of these practitioners of the queer theory have decided that the word pedophilia has a negative stigma, and that therefore they're proposing a new term, which is minor attracted adults. Is that true?
Oh yeah. Yeah, pedophilia would be the next thing they normalize. The man who was here last week talked about the way the teachers are trained now. And all of the teachers are communists, you know, they're Marxists, and these philosophies are Marxist. Queer theory is totally Marxist. And their whole goal is to destabilize. You know, of course we know they're pitting oppressor against oppressed. They want to destabilize, tear everything down, cause all kinds of problems, and then come riding in as the solution. So, but he said he has a 50-minute talk, Jeff. I don't know about anybody else, but I would love to hear that.
Yeah, I hope we get Greg Lawson back. Yeah, and this new book, Pete Hexas had that book out, A Battlefield American Mind. We've had it in a library here.
Oh, yeah.
Any other questions? Jennifer, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I